We are living in difficult times, and times we could not have imagined 12 months ago would ever happen in the developed Western world. And yet, here we are. And there may be an opportunity now, faced with the fact that we don't control the world, we are not masters of the universe. And the way we too readily box God off, an opportunity to understand ourselves and God and our relationship with God as so much more than we do when we're busy covering up. As I said in the earlier video, a lot of our activity is actually covering up the fact that we're mortal. It's a busyness that's meant to stave off mortality. But faced with death and dying, people change, and we might too. If we look at the great saints and mystics, you often see this. Julian of Norwich, who survived 3 plagues, but also lost family and loved ones, and suffered herself, was very close to death. In fact, that's when her divine showing succumbed to her. Or St. Francis, who was locked up in a prison, also a place of death and dying, and lived in a time of leprosy and also plague. They're good examples of people who were brought, as we are being brought, if we will let ourselves be, right to the place where we look at it hard. Who are we? What is our life really? And find, without the neurotic sort of activity that surrounds so much of human life, to find ourselves resting ultimately in the loving presence of God, and that in that place we enter into God's kingdom. In fact, we can live there now if we let go of the rest. You can't bring the rest with you. You have to leave it to move in, and that generally seems unattractive to people. But in our particular circumstances now, it might be much more attractive. We see Jesus in a way pushing the family at Bethany into that place. He doesn't rush, and we see that increasingly as his ministry moves on in time, that his rushing to the aid of people who are sick changes completely. He senses no need to rush, but does things as they arrive with him. So we hear him respond to the call to visit Lazarus and the sisters, not with an immediate packing up his toothbrush, but actually a delayed and steady and slow response. He goes, but there's no sense of hurry in that. And he actually says that that is deliberate. And Martha, although she professes faith in resurrection, and we can assume that that is absolutely true, and although she loves Jesus and has a great love and faith in him, still that isn't enough when faced with the loss of a brother, of course. But Jesus is saying, even in that pain, move even further along, right into the pain, rather than stopping short of it and wishing it had been different, if only you had been there, but rather moving right into it, to discover that the change has happened, but life continues. And Jesus demonstrates that for them by calling Lazarus from the tomb. And as he arrives outside the tomb, he must be unbound and set free. And we then are left wondering, how did that work out? We hear that it is the turning point for many people, that their fear of Jesus and their need to get rid of him spiked, and we can see this marks the very moment when the determination is absolutely set that Jesus must die. And that really comes out of religion's response to a challenge to a worldview that has been presented. What would happen if people thought that living again was a possibility that must be stopped, rather than inquired over and prayed over? It's a narrow response, and one that we would want to avoid, and that the church would want to avoid. So we have an opportunity to discover ourselves newly through this time, and that isn't going to be by arguing with it. It's going to be by steadily entering into it, not hurriedly, but in a calm way, and to deal with the pain as it arises, and to stay in the presence of God. All of this ties with our understanding of ourselves as church, and I've put this Godly Play plaque or icon up for us, because we aren't sharing a Eucharist in the normal way. And you can go online and view Eucharist, and perhaps you've already done that, and perhaps you'd like to do it. But of course, the eating one bread and sharing one cup has profoundly changed by not being in a group together physically. And we might want to pause and reflect on what that might mean, because we certainly wouldn't consider it Eucharistic to have a video of a priest celebrating the Mass and everybody at home with piece of bread and a glass of wine. And yet, when Jesus at the Last Supper is saying, "This bread is my body, this wine is my blood," he is setting up a way that we can remember him and his gift, and in the context of the Passover, of the angel of death. But also he's saying something about life, bread and wine, basics. So the body of Christ is actually with us. We are all still connected in that way with each other, and with the business of living, and eating that bread and drinking that cup. This is who we are. We eat and we drink. We are born and we die. But we are also eternal, and we live in God's presence always. Amen.